everyone, and welcome to another episode of the KNOL-Edge Show powered by KNOLSKAPE. My name is Ahmar Zaman, and I will be your moderator for today's session. For everyone who has tuned in for the first time to the KNOL-Edge Show, this is an initiative by KNOLSKAPE to bring leaders from different parts of the globe and discuss matters related to business, technology, people, and life in general. The discussion in today's episode will be around the topic, sustaining cultural transformation. And without further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce to you our guests. Our special guest for today's show is Neenu Porus. Neenu is the Director for Talent Management at IndiGo, the InterGlobe Aviation Limited. She is an accomplished HR practitioner with varied experience of conceptualizing and deploying innovative talent management programs and creating learning experiences that generate business value. She is curious about how organizations continue to stay competitive in this ever-changing context, and hence decided to write a thesis on dynamic capabilities as part of a fellowship program at NDI Gurgaon. Prior to working with IndiGo, Neenu was associated with Yum Brands as a training manager for KFC. Thank you so much, Neenu, for joining us on the KNOL-Edge Show.
Thank you, Ahmar, for having me over.
Alongside Neenu, we have with us Manu Nanda. At the helm of KNOLSKAPE India's and APAC business is Manu Nanda, Senior Vice President and Chief Business Officer. A self-initiator, Manu thrives on chasing audacious business goals. His expertise lies in creating value for customers, helping organizations with their talent transformation efforts across levels, and delivering high business results. A seasoned enterprise leader with 25 plus years of diverse corporate experience across FMCG, petroleum, retail, automotives, oil and gas, and training and coaching, Manu has held leadership roles across channel management, key accounts, franchisee operations, and consulting. Outside of work, Manu is a movie buff, an avid reader, and a compulsive swimmer. Thank you so much, Manu, for joining us once again.
As always, Ahmar, pleasure to be here.
So before we move to the more serious discussions, we have a small rapid fire round with both of you. Manu has been here, so he knows. But for your context, Neenu, we at KNOLSKAPE strongly believe that learning cannot be engaging without some fun, right? So this segment is focused on having a little bit of fun. So it's called a Would You Rather segment. And we will start with you, Neenu. Now, this session helps our audience and all of us to know your personalities, your habits, your tendencies a little more, right? So we'll start with you. The first question is, would you rather live on a deserted island alone or with someone you can't stand?
I'd rather live in a deserted island all by myself.
Okay, so the second question is, would you rather always have to sing instead of speaking or dance instead of walking?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't think I can survive without thinking, but yeah, so I'd prioritize thinking first and then speaking. And between dancing and walking, I guess both actually.
Oh, very, very exciting to know that. Our next question is again to you, Neenu. Would you rather have a photographic memory or the ability to forget anything you want?
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, I'd rather have a photographic memory. Just makes things easier, I guess.
True, absolutely.
Perfect, perfect. Second last question for you, Neenu. Would you rather trust organized people with experience or unpredictable people with advanced tech skills?
Oh yes, I mean I'm all for creativity on the go and of course, even if that means being unpredictable, that's fine. And advanced tech skills is definitely a skill of the future. So yeah, I'll go for that one.
Very interesting. I think that speaks a lot about the leaders of today, right? We are okay with a little bit of unpredictability because we are dealing with it every day, but we can't do without advanced technology skills, right?
Sure, yes.
The last question for you in this segment, Neenu, is would you rather always be truthful to your boss or to your team?
Oh, that's quite a tricky one. And I'd be truthful to both, to anyone I interact with.
Yeah.
But
Not
you don't
just
have a choice here.
the-
That's the fun of the game, right? You have to choose one. I'm sorry, I have to be a little strict in my teams. I work really hard on them.
So I don't know, if you're not giving me an option and I have to choose one, then I guess it would be being truthful to my boss.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for being such a sport, Neenu, and wonderful responses. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We'll move to Manu. He has had some experience with this round. So let's see how he fares. The first one for you, Manu, is would you rather live in a world without books or a world without movies?
I would live in a world without books. I can't live in a world without movies, goes without saying. So yeah, the passion for movies continues, and I know books are supposed to be man's best friend, but I would still switch to movies. Yes.
Right. And the most popular books, any which way, get adapted into movies, right?
And
these days.
maybe
You
watch.
won't miss out on much.
Absolutely.
Great. Second one, would you rather be able to speak and understand all languages or be able to communicate with animals?
I would say communicate with animals because I'm an animal lover. So especially, all the pets that you can keep at home. And when you have pets at home, there's nothing can be better than understanding their emotions and being part of your family. If everyone else is speaking, why not them?
Wonderful. I think that will be a lot of noise for you around, but still. Okay, so moving on. The next question is, would you rather always have to tell the truth or never be able to understand others' lies?
I think tell the truth, be honest. So I would stick to the first one.
As simple as that. Cool. We now move to the second last question for you, Manu. Would you rather never be able to use a mobile phone or never be able to use ChatGPT?
I think Chat GPT is the attraction. I want to be in a space where I can use Chat GPT. So goes without saying, I think that has made life so easily. And I think going back to what Neenu mentioned, technology is there to support you. So why not make use of that?
Awesome, awesome. The last question in this round for you, Manu, is would you rather go on a long workation or a short vacation without any work?
Short vacation. Vacation is a vacation. No work coming along.
Yeah, so a lot of us like to blend work with our vacations, right? But there are splitters also who keep work and vacation very separate. So
Yeah.
good to know that. Wonderful responses from both of you, Manu and Neenu, on that round, and it was so much fun hearing your perspectives, right? With that, we come to the end of that fun round, and we will now move to the topical discussion for today. And to start off with, I have a question for Neenu, and I'll come to you, Manu, also to get your perspective. And the question is, what does culture mean to you? And how does your individual concept of culture align with that of your specific organization?
So culture for me is how I live my life. My my belief systems, my values, how I interact with people in my social circle, my friends and family. So in a nutshell, it's how I live my life is what culture means to me. And that's pretty much how it is at the workplace as well. It isn't really different. The only difference is that in the personal life, culture is more to do with people who you're connected with in a social sense. And here, of course, culture is all about connecting with people, communicating with people in a professional setup or in a workplace setup. So in that sense, it's quite similar. And I'm glad to be working for an organization, the values of which totally resonate with what I believe in. So yes, in a happy place.
Awesome. Manu, what is your idea of culture?
Yeah, quite similar to what Neenu has mentioned. So culture, there's no definite definition where you could say, hey, this is culture. Culture, I think, is beliefs, values, behaviors, everything coming together. And actually, culture for me starts with your own personal values in terms of how you've been brought up, your family background, everything getting linked together, and those values actually getting connected to the organization values. So that alignment is very, very important. That's to the second part of your question in terms of how you would align it to your organization, because if there is no alignment, then there is always that disconnect. And for culture to work, for values to work together, I think there needs to be a sense of emotional connect. There needs to be a certain set of behaviors that are getting exhibited. There needs to be some sense of emotional bonding. That is where cultures can set within an organization and for the individual to actually connect and respond, I would say.
Thanks, Manu. We will now move to the next question. And it basically revolves around the entire idea of how much COVID-19 has impacted business operations. And I mean, there are a lot of reports and theories around how much it has transformed the business ecosystem. But in terms of culture purely, especially for very distinct businesses like the airlines, Neenu, how immensely has the pandemic impacted the organizational culture?
Oh, it's, this question of yours actually brings to mind all that we went through 2-3 years ago. And of course, as you would know, ours was one of the industries which was very severely actually impacted by the pandemic. Because, honestly, the place of an aircraft is up in the sky and not being grounded. So obviously, almost about more than 50% of our workforce did not overnight, when the national lockdown was announced, they did not have any role. I mean, they just didn't know. They couldn't go to the airports and they didn't know what to do next. So it was a very tough time for us. And the topmost thing in our mind at that point in time, in terms of the culture bit, was that we didn't want anybody to feel left out or feel alone. And in fact, much before the pandemic, we would always say, one of our values would always be, and we would always say that one is never alone at IndiGo. That's something that you would find people talking about, irrespective of whether it's a challenging situation at work or a challenge that they're facing in their personal lives. Somebody would always walk up and they would say that, what, you're never alone at IndiGo. So yes, in terms of how it impacted the culture, it was, those were really tough times, but we did quite a few things. And in fact, in hindsight, we feel that we were really able to leverage that time together to kind of come closer, in a sense, because for whatever reasons, all of us were at home, and there wasn't much to do in terms of running a airline or running an operations. Therefore, all our attention focused on how we could come together as an organization and just have our arms around each other and just assure each other that things will get better. So I don't know if I should be talking about some of the things that we did now, or maybe, as the conversation goes on, maybe I'll share what were some of the things that we did at that point in time to kind of reiterate the culture that IndiGo talks about.
Wonderful anecdotes there, Neenu, and we will definitely be interested to know more, like you said, further in the discussion. Manu, what's your take on this entire impact of COVID-19 on culture of organizations?
I think, Ahmar, if I see, being part of a consulting organization, an organization where we are at a position to talk to senior leaders, say, for example, in IndiGo, what's happening in the airline industry, or what's happening in FMCG, or what's happening in technology, or what's happening in automobile. I think last 2 years or last 2.5 years were really bad for a lot of organizations. And the reason for that was because of, people being dispersed, people being at remote locations. So there was a certain feeling of eroding of culture happening, because even when hiring was happening remotely. People did not get that advantage or the benefit of actually coming to the office, being part of a team, direct communication, sitting across with the leaders, having a conversation on values. So values or culture was just one slide coming as part of the onboarding. So that is where the disconnect was. And I think somewhere there is where, you did have, which is now actually settled down, of, mass resignations happening, quiet quitting happening, people moving out because they did not feel that connect, in spite of the organization trying their best to make people feel connected. But I would say now things are getting better because people are back to office. There is, I would say, a priority from the leaders, from HR teams, to build culture in the organizations. In fact, this is one of the topmost agendas for a lot of HR heads, for CHROs, for learning heads, to actually build that culture back and ensure that, culture or values percolates down to the last person in the organization. And end of the day, values is the DNA for any culture. So if you're not aware of the values, if you're not aware of, what actually binds that entire organization together, it's not a win-win for the employees or for the organization. Emma.
Values is the DNA of culture. Excellent, Manu. Thank you so much. With that, we move to the next question. And Manu, I would like you to take that one first. What, in your view, are the key drivers of culture in an organization?
A great question, Emma. So drivers, I would say, it goes without saying. Culture building in any organization starts with the behavior of the leadership team. Because that is where people would see, observe, and see, okay, what is my leader doing? How does he behave? So that is where, your leadership, as they say, do the leaders walk the talk and talk about values, talk about culture, and is that coming part in terms of their behavior, that part of their communication? And that can only happen. And there is one very interesting book that I read a couple of months back. It's called The Culture Code. So where it talks about, leaders being vulnerable, leaders being open in terms of their communication, leaders actually creating that sense of safety for the employees to actually open up and talk. So that is where the first step of, culture building starts, where leaders themselves show that they are vulnerable and they're as human as the teams that they lead. Second driver would be, I think, would be in terms of, how the communication goes across the organization. So again, going back to something that I mentioned. So is culture and values just in one corner of the office, or just restricted to the realms of the HR team? Or is it that a person sitting out of some remote location also aware of what is it that holds the culture for that organization together? So that is the other part. And the third part, and very critical part, I think, is a sense of belongingness. So if you are emotionally connected, that is where it's a win-win for the culture. And that itself ensures that culture for that, particular organization stays strong and holds the people together. That even tomorrow, there are cases, and I think in our professional lives between you, Ahmar, me, and Neenu, there have been so many cases where people have actually held back to the organization and not taken that jump for the next role because the culture of that organization was so strong.
Absolutely.
That's my thought.
Very, very interesting take there, Manu. Neenu, your take on what are the drivers of culture?
Yeah, so, great point made by Manu that leaders are the true culture champions in any organization. And if they are walking the talk on what the culture stands for and what our values are, I think half the battle is won. The other thing that I'd like to add on beside that is that just how the work gets done, right? So how do we do the hiring? How do we recognize people? How do we communicate with people? How do we even let go of people? All of those are, levers that we use to kind of drive home the whole culture of the organization. And not to, of course, mention how the onboarding gets done. So the entire employee life cycle and all the touch points are something which we can use or leverage to ensure that we align the employees' culture and our values in the right way.
Very, very interesting take there, Neenu. With that, I come to my next question, and it is a very critical one as it talks about the main challenges in implementing culture transformation, especially in today's times, which are so dynamic. Neenu, if you can take that one.
Yes, absolutely. Of our business, right? Like our employees are distributed in some 78 different locations within India. We have about 27 odd stations outside of India. So with such a distributed workforce, it does get a little challenging to ensure that the understanding that our employees have all over our regional offices is exactly the same that it is with people here. So we are very wary of subcultures being formed which are not in alignment with what the values that we espouse. So the challenge, of course, is one, the fact that the workforce is distributed and dispersed all over. And then, of course, the other challenge is that the nature of business is such that we are not, even though we might want to leverage technology, but most of our people do not have access to, say, a computer or a laptop. They are there at the boarding gates or at the reservation counters where they might not have access to be able to connect with other employees and know what's happening within the organization. So just the sheer nature of business is also such that it does not really allow us to leverage technology for every single employee and cascade information and thereby build that transparency and that two-way communication. So I'd say that for us, there are these two main challenges that we face when it comes to culture transformation. One is the dispersed workforce, and the other is, of course, the nature of business. But having said that, we have, like any other organization, we've also found ways and means to maneuver through these challenges. And so we've come up with different things that we do. One is, of course, there's something called as leadership station sponsors. So what we've done is that each of the leaders have been assigned a few stations where they go down and actually visit the stations and meet up with the employees there. Like I said, technology it's not always possible for us to do it virtually, and hence people from our corporate office travel a lot. They go to these stations, interact, talk to employees there, and help them understand what IndiGo is all about or what bleeding blue means for an IndiGo employee.
Very, very interesting insights there, Neenu, from the point of view of IndiGo's operations, right? Now, Manu, in your experience working with clients from different industries and sectors, right? What have you witnessed as the major challenges that clients come to you, for solutions in terms of this entire culture building activity?
Yeah, so goes without saying, the two topmost is what Neenu has already mentioned. I think a dispersed workforce, that is the biggest challenge for any organization, and actually can understand, IndiGo's challenge because they're vast and spread across the country in all kinds of locations, starting from metros to B-class towns as well. The other challenge I think is, what we've experienced is because of little bit of, I would say, not exactly, but little bit of turmoil across globally because of layoffs happening, what's happening in the IT industry, IT, ITS industry. Big players like an Amazon or some of the other large organizations are actually laying off people. So that is one factor where organizations are slightly skeptical in terms of understanding what are the next 6 months. How are the next 6 months going to be? That's one. Second is because of people coming back to work, while say for IndiGo, it's still a dispersed workforce. A lot of organizations are bringing back their employees 100%. There is still some elements of hybrid working happening where employees are allowed to stay out of the office, say maybe 3 days in a week, but maybe come back to office for 2 days. Because of this, people are not able to adjust to the change. So there is resistance to this kind of a change. So when there is any kind of change happening, there is always a disconnect with the organization's culture where it feels that, hey, this is going against me and this is not what it should be. So if I summarize, going back to what Neenu said, it's the dispersed workforce, it is hybrid working, resistance to change is the third one, which is, what we experience every time. And, this comes out from most of the clients that we speak to. And also, lack of communication. So a lot of times we hear from people that, they're not able to get the right message from the leaders. Either the leader himself is not aware of what are the changes happening, or there is some tendency to keep it to themselves instead of being transparent. Now, this varies from organization to organization, depending on what's getting driven from the top. But these are factors where, somewhere the employee would feel disconnected if he's not getting the true picture. And that again contributes to the erosion of culture in an organization.
I think those are really relatable and realistic scenarios you put before us, Manu. Thanks a lot. Coming to you, Neenu, you spoke vividly about the dispersed workforce aspect of IndiGo, right? Do you have any instances, any examples or anecdotes to share how you actually overcame this challenge of establishing culture over a dispersed workforce? If you can share that with us and the audience.
Yeah, sure. There are multiple things we did, of course, during the pandemic, and we continue to do in terms of engaging our employees and sharing with them what IndiGo stands for. One of the things that we did is that most of the employees, though we did not hire as much during the pandemic, but whatever hiring we did do in our corporate functions like the digital functions, etc., and where employees got onboarded virtually, we call them back again for a connect, where we could help them understand, and it was a in-person session where we help them understand what it stands for and what are our values, what do they mean for us. So the onboarding was one aspect. Then we did a lot of these social events where we got people to do things together. So, for example, again, I'm referring back to the pandemic. So we did a campaign which was on when the skies will be blue again. And we said that it's not an individual employee activity. The teams have to be, it could be smaller teams, it could be a larger function, but they have to come together and then shoot a video and send it across to us. So the idea was that how do they collaborate? How do they come together and work together? Even if it's a fun thing to do, but how do they do that? So that was, again, something else that we did. empathy is, one of our values is pride with humility. And for our cabin crew, what we did was everyday empathy. So we said, we created these empathy maps for the cabin crew, and we said, walk a mile in our shoes. So, that's again one of our culture tenets. And we wanted people to actually pause what they're doing and think about a certain cross section of the workforce and see how is it that they do their work and what can we do to support them. So there were these, targeted campaigns all across, just to kind of reiterate either a culture value or to bring home the fact that, we are all in it together. So yes, that also talking about transparency that Manu just, spoke of, that leaders, if there's insufficient communication from the leaders. So, of course, right from formal events like a annual town hall, which our CEO leads, where the strategic priorities for the next 1 or 2 years is clearly called out, to these informal events, like, getting the leaders to shoot a quick 2-minute video talking about how the next weeks are going to look like. So we always ensure that people right at our stations and at the lowest level get to directly interact with the leadership team and hear from the leadership team. So we've got some formal channels of communication, which are the newsletters, the CEO's blog, the annual CEO's town hall. And then we have all these, in fact, most of our leaders have their own blogs. And, we do these series where like how you started off the conversation by asking us some questions. We also do a pretty much a similar kind of a thing, which goes into our newsletter where they just get to know their leader a little better. So yes, multiple things to just ensure that there is enough and more communication and people are not jumping to conclusion, whether it is to do with how the business is faring, to where we are headed, to generally getting to know each other better.
I think that's a very exhaustive and interesting checklist of activities that you've shared with all of us and with the audience. When it reaches them, I'm sure they tremendously benefit from this. Thanks, Neenu, for that. Manu, in your experience, what are the best practices that you have come across that have worked well for clients in terms of cascading those cultural values, especially in today's dispersed or hybrid kind of organizations?
Yeah, so I think, again, going back to what I mentioned, and again, Neenu, what you rightly said, it starts with the right kind of communication. So first and foremost is our leaders communicating, our leaders bringing the ethos, the elements that will keep the workforce engaged. So it's all part of your culture. How are you actually yourself walking the talk and ensuring that the culture building is happening across every time? So even if it's a small meeting, even if it's a meeting, do you talk about culture building? Do you talk about your values? What does that organization stand for? That is one. Second is the use of technology in a big way. So I can't help but mention it that a lot of organizations are now using gamification to ensure that culture building happens in remote locations and dispersed workforce through the use of technology, through the use of gamification, because that creates that extra engagement, that creates that extra attention, which would not be there, if it just, again, a normal slide or a PPT coming as part of your onboarding or as part of the discussion. That is the second part. And the third part is also, a sense of belongingness getting created. So and that could be through a lot of things that may be happening in IndiGo, what Neenu shared, and that's been a great list to hear that, Neenu, in terms of super exhaustive in terms of the initiatives taken. So quite similar, I would say, if not that exhaustive, is where organizations have been taking it very proactively in terms of ensuring that, culture building and values gets dissipated to the last person in the organization, Ahmad, if I would sum up everything in terms of, our conversations with different people across different industries.
Wonderful. So Manu, coming back to your point of the unpredictability of today's times, and where you mentioned that people and leaders don't know what is coming in the next 6 months, right? And especially in the context of cultural sustenance, where we are trying to factor in for the times which may be very unpredictable. How does organization strategize for cultural transformation with sustenance in mind?
Right. Great question, Ahmad. So I think there is that very famous quote by Peter Drucker, which he talks about culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it goes without saying. I mean, till the time you don't have a very focused approach on culture building, you might have the best strategy, it's going to fail. If your people are not aligned to the execution of that strategy is not going to work. So the first step is to build that culture, and culture building does not happen overnight. It's not that tomorrow any leader or the CEO gets up and says, hey, starting tomorrow onwards, my culture in this organization has to be this. It's over a period of time. It is over a period of behaviors getting exhibited that the culture forms, and it takes years and years for that organization to be known by its culture. And you can always pick up, you will randomly pick up and say, hey, this organization, there is some kind of a perception of what this organization would be in terms of the culture building. So one, yes, strategy is very important. When I say strategy, to make culture building a strategy, that is what I'm trying to say. Second thing is in terms of understanding and measuring your progress somewhere. So you might be on the right path, but is that culture building happening? So are you having those frequent feedback sessions from your employees? Are you engaging them? Are you understanding whether the progress is happening in the right direction? Because that is which will give you some sense of the sustainment of culture building, or, how is it that your entire energy, your entire thought process to ensure that your organization moves forward is working, improving at every step. So wherever you get, any kind of feedback, are you able to go back and say, okay, this is the change we have made? Obviously, every recommendation cannot be taken, because there would be certain budgets, there could be certain policies in place which need to be there. And also continuous engagement. I think communication and engagement is the key word, where you need to ensure that, the right communication is going, people are feeling engaged. Again, I go on saying again and again, the sense of belongingness being there. If all this is in place, there's no reason for any good organization to ensure that there is sustenance of culture and it continues and takes the organization on the right journey ahead.
Wonderful. I think one cannot get more specific in terms of how you've answered that question. Neenu, your take on that bit?
Yeah, Manu's already covered pretty much whatever is needed for this. Right. Just one other thing that I'd like to call out very clearly is that in my conversations, I've often, come across people where they think that culture is something which just organically evolves. Now, that's a very dangerous belief to have, because while of course it's not as if it wouldn't, if you don't do anything about it, something will happen. Some culture would be there, but that's not what we're looking at. We want a culture to be relevant and resonate the strategic priorities of the organization. And therefore, though culture is dynamic, it can evolve and it should evolve. I think it should totally be a very well thought out, crafted plan by the leadership, by the HR team, by everybody involved, whoever needs to do this, to sit down and chalk it out that, okay, these are our values. In our first set of the game, it's served us well. And now in the second set of the game, maybe we need to do something different, or we need to add to this or tweak it or whatever. But that's a discussion that needs to happen. It shouldn't be just left for the employees to come up with what they think, or like I mentioned, that it's a dangerous place to be if you think that you should just let culture organically evolve without putting any thought to it. So there has to be a strategy on how culture should evolve, and if there's any change or any edit or anything at all, it should be very clearly communicated to all the employees.
That's a very interesting point you mentioned there about culture evolving organically. And it reminds me of a quote I was reading, that culture is built by what people want to do rather than what you want them to do. So from that perspective, how do you really ensure that the company's culture remains relevant and aligned with the business objectives? Have there been any occasions in your experience where culture values had to be traded off for business goals or vice versa? Neenu, if you can take that one as well.
No, I actually don't recollect any instance where a culture value got traded off for a business priority. In fact, because of the culture value which everybody signed up for and were aligned on, we get clarity on our strategic priority as well. So, for example, if we need to take a decision whether we would pursue a certain business proposition, if it is contradictory to our culture values, we will actually not go ahead with that. It just makes it that much more easier for us to base our decisions on, whether it is a business decision or a talent decision. So I don't think it's ever been traded for this thing. Not in all my, at least I haven't come across an instance like this either here or in my previous organization. But if there is an opportunity where you see that it's the values are not helping in our strategic direction, then you may choose to, of course, revisit those, or like I said, clarify those further. But once it's signed up and everybody's aligned on it, then I don't think there is any dissonance there. It all just moves, strategy and culture moves hand in hand together.
Very interesting. Manu, do you agree that culture is built by what people actually want to do rather than what you want them to do?
Yeah, I would say that to a large extent, Ahmar. And again, resonating with the fact what Neenu mentioned, I think even my experience never come across any situation where there's been a need to do a trade-off between your values, cultures versus the business goals. I think what works for any good organization would be a perfect alignment in terms of what your business objectives are and how is it aligned to your values. I mean, it needs to be hand in hand. And for any business objectives to be aligned, first is, I think, the right and clear communication of those business objectives to the team. So is the team aware of what those business objectives are for the year, for the quarter, or, how is it getting aligned? And there somewhere, linking it to your values. So just to give you an example, at KNOLSKAPE, one of the core values for us is do epic stuff. So when you say do epic stuff, it is all about going beyond your normal call of duty and saying this, yes, this is my routine stuff, which is I'm supposed to do, but what is it that I can go beyond? Beyond is maybe coming up with some idea, helping your team member, collaborating with other teams, ensuring that, the objectives not only for your team are met, but also you're supporting the other team members. Or the other value that I could think of is maybe think growth. Growth is a big thing at KNOLSKAPE. So when you're talking about growth, what does it mean for the business function? Where I'm looking at growth as in a revenue point of view. What would it mean, say, for our product team, where they're looking at growth in terms of increasing the product pipeline and understanding, okay, what is it that the market now needs, or what is it that clients now need? What is it that I can take to the clients in terms of a new simulation or a new product or a new solution, which can immediately connect with and actually help them solve their challenges. So if their perfect alignment is there, there's no reason for any disconnect to happen, Ahmad. That's my thought.
Great take there, Manu and Neenu, especially from the context of your individual organizations. I think gives a lot of clarity to all of us. With that, we move to the last question, the topical round. And Manu, since this is your area of expertise, I would want you to take it first. How do you address cultural differences and ensure that the company's culture is inclusive of all employees? That is one. And what role can training and development opportunities play in supporting the company's cultural transformation?
Again, a great question. First of all, I think organizations need to acknowledge that there is some disconnect or some differentiation, whether you don't have the right kind of policies in place or you don't have the right kind of communication in place. So first is the acknowledgement of that fact. So if that is there, and they're able to realize that, okay, we are at point A and we need to go there, keeping in view the current set of employees that we have. So it all starts with, again, going back to fostering a culture of openness, fostering a culture of communication, making sure that there is, at an individual level, awareness, possibly of your unconscious biases, that if you have it. So it's only once you are aware yourself is where you can move towards inclusivity and ensuring that there is a culture of people staying together. That is the second part. Third part is in terms of ensuring that you are able to have the right kind of policies and practices in place, which is very important. So till the time you're not, there is no code of conduct available, or there is no policy in place, it's again going to be a very, very scattered, where each individual can just get up and do whatever they want, which again spoils, as we say, no clear policies. That means it spoils the culture of the organization in a big way. That is the third point. And I would say training and plays a big role, goes without saying. So whether it's anything related to diversity or inclusion that most of the organizations are not talking about, doing the basic level of awareness where they stand individually, creating that culture of a very structured process in place, or a very structured training calendar in place where people can learn the best practices, or they could be experts coming in from outside or experts coming in from other industries to share their examples in terms of what are they doing in their organization to build that culture of inclusivity coming in. I am absolutely for it. I know it goes without saying, it will help the organization and take it forward in the right direction. If that answers your question.
Wonderful. Absolutely, it does. Your take on how culture can be made inclusive, and what is the role of training and development in this entire exercise?
So, one thing I think I've missed in the previous questions that you had for us was that it's very important while of course awareness building sessions are very, very important. It's important to communicate the right thing. During this communication, it's also very important to convey the why of the values, or the why is, like Simon Sinek says, right? Start with the why. And we do that. So for example, for us, our why, our raison d'etre is, or our purpose is giving wings to the nation. So when we call that out, and then we tell them that, and that's obviously the why is so powerful, it's so elevated that if employees do, and this also answers the question where you said that do they do what you ask them to do, or do they do when they want to do it? So they would want to do it only if they understand the why of it. If I just tell them that you have to be passionately consistent, or the service has to be from the heart, they would not. But if I tell them that how does it all add up to our why, or how does it all add up to our purpose of giving wings to the nation, of connecting remote locations, of giving employment opportunities to people in say Pantnagar, and connecting these small towns and cities. That's when they understand, and when that understanding happens, then it's just a way easier for them to own those values as their own, and make it their own, and align their behaviors accordingly. And of course, training is I personally feel training is the only way to do it at scale. It's not possible, and also for a dispersed workforce like ours, possible to go to all of those 78 locations and do it. So what we can do is train our culture champions, who can then in turn ensure that it's cascaded in the right spirit.
Wonderful, wonderful points mentioned there by Neenu and Manu, and a great conversation, very insightful, very enriching, a lot of anecdotes shared. And what I personally loved about the discussion was that there were so many actionable insights people can actually apply. All of those best practices that both of you have shared today. Thank you so much for that. And with that, we come to the end of our topical discussion for today's episode. But before I let both of you go, there's another small fun round, and something I mentioned at the start of the session as well. I worked really hard on these games. But for a change, I thought for this particular episode, I'll give you both a task, right? So the final segment of
Ahmar, this is all out of syllabus. For a change, why don't we ask the questions to you? You pass on the list to me, and put me on the hot seat.
I promise I will participate in this one. So like I said, there's a small task for both of you. The last segment is called Two Truth and a Lie, right? So both of you have to share two truths and a lie with us, right? Without telling them which is the lie, right? The other two people have to identify that lie. Now, your part is to ensure that the lie doesn't sound like a lie and it sounds really realistic and true, right? So, yeah, if you ever played this game, I would assume that you know the drill, right? So we'll start with you, Manu, since Neenu went first in the last segment. Tell us two truths.
It would be ladies first going, and you would get opportunity again.
Sure, if she wants to go first, we can let her.
But yeah, I mean, I can also take it. It's not a bad.
Your call, Neenu.
Okay,
So two truths and a lie.
So I have trekked to Kilimanjaro. I love swimming, and I'm very good in advanced Excel.
Advanced Excel. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can make a guess. It's not difficult for me. So the last one is not true, which is the Excel part. First two, I say you've done it.
Okay. How about you, Ahmar?
I think the same. I think advanced Excel skill is not true. Swimming and trek to Kilimanjaro are true.
No, actually, I haven't. While I've done a fair bit of trekking, but haven't trekked to Kilimanjaro.
Oh my God.
So we take our words back on the Excel. That means Excel, we can reach out to you for support now.
She has tricked us totally.
Yeah.
Wow, excellent.
Super.
Great. I think you are a champ in this game. Manu, you go next.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking. Okay, 3. I have flown a plane. I have jumped out from a plane. I have represented my university in swimming.
You have flown a plane is not true in my mind. What do you say, Neenu?
I'd say jumped out of a plane is too far-fetched. I don't think Manu would have jumped out.
He would have done skydiving is why he mentioned that. But flown a plane.
Oh, okay, yeah. Jumped out of a plane could be skydiving, yeah.
Okay, flown a plane is my final thing.
Okay, Neenu, what's yours? Jump, you mentioned, is it?
Yeah, I feel jumped out of a plane.
Yeah, so you're right on that. Never jumped out of plane, but flown a plane for 10 minutes with, of course, someone. So yes, goes without saying. And the third one, of course, is true. So you got it
Oh, good.
right.
Clear winner because she got at least one answer right. Both of us, especially me, I got both wrong. So if there was a hamper that we had, then Neenu would take it fair and square.
A virtual hamper would do.
Yeah.
Virtually, I'll take my hamper.
So yeah, that we come to the end of a very wonderful knowledge show. This episode is my personal favorite already, right? And thank you so much for your time and joining us and those wonderful insights and anecdotes that both of you have shared with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ahmar. Thank you for being a wonderful host.
Yep.
And good set of questions. It was a very interesting conversation. And thank you, Manu. Thank you for the chat today.
Thank you, Neenu. Always a pleasure talking to you. And Ahmar, great show, goes without saying. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. You both have a great day ahead. Thanks.
You too. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.